Have depression? Take some Divya Medavati. Ailing from diabetes? Here's some Madhugrat for you. Suffering from cancer? Have some Amla and aloe vera juice. Oh, these aren't my suggestions, rather his.
जिनको कैंसर है उनको तो सारी चीजें सात चीजें एक साथ लेनी चाहिए. आंवला, एलोवेरा, गिलोय, नीम, हल्दी, तुलसी, गोधन, अर्क.
These are all medical conditions that require prescription drugs or treatment. If anyone promotes medication or advertises it this way to the public, that would normally be legal unless you're selling an Ayurvedic product. In which case you don't have to be too worried. 1. There is a government body protecting you and your interests. And 2. There is only one law enforcing these products and it's not very strictly enforced. And exploiting this law, we have huge billion-dollar companies in the Ayurveda market today. I'm probably going to do a series on such companies depending on how successful this video is. So if you aren't subscribed, make sure you do. Hi, my name is Pranav and you're watching Science is Dope. And in this video, we're going to look at Patanjali and how they use these marketing tactics to mislead you. Because they are really good at marketing themselves, be their product or the faces that represent them, even if it means lying to do so. A few days back, I came across this post on Twitter, which said that Acharya Balakrishna of Patanjali Research Institute, he is the CEO of Patanjali by the way, has been listed among the top 2% scientists in the world according to a study by Stanford University. I was confused because why would someone carry out such a study and on what basis would they judge a scientist? So I clicked on the link provided in the source, fully expecting a detailed study. And surprise, surprise, it wasn't. The Stanford study mentioned here isn't a research paper, but rather an updated list of top cited, not top scientists, top cited scientists put forward by Elsevier in collaboration with Stanford University. And I can't deny that his name was on their lists. But when I explain to you what this means and how this entire post is one big lie, you will laugh. For starters, even though there were research papers from Patanjali all these years, papers where he's the lead author, the citations suddenly spiked in 2020 and 2021. So what happened in those years? Coronal, the COVID-19 wonder drug by Patanjali. After the pandemic hit in 2020, most research institutes and businesses got busy trying to find ways to fight COVID-19. While some innovations were helpful like the mRNA vaccine, telemarketing and contactless transactions, a whole bunch of them were questionable, like this mask that can open as you eat. What's the point of a mask then? And of course, that's the coronal kit. Some of you might be like, whoa Pranav, how can you compare this mask that completely fails the purpose with a medicine created by a reputed and trusted Ayurvedic company? Because when it comes to fighting COVID, they both would fail. I'll tell you why. Coronal claimed to be the first evidence-based Ayurvedic medicine. In fact, in their press release, this was paraded around like a huge selling point. So what's this evidence? This research paper, and based on it the products were approved by the Ministry of Ayush. The only problem is this was an extremely flawed study. For starters, this is only a pilot study, meaning it's only an initial study that says, hey, these results seem positive, indicating there may be something here. Let's conduct more studies to be sure. But no further studies were done. No medicine should be released based on a pilot study alone. But Coronal was. Was this pilot study at least carefully designed? It was a joke. The study enrolled 100 COVID-19 patients with mild or no symptoms. They were given Coronal, which is basically a mixture of Giloy, Swasari Ras and Tulsi Kanbati. Out of the 100, 5 dropped out before the study ended. Out of the remaining participants, 50 were given a placebo and 45 were given Coronal. The age range was only 18 to 55 and only 3 male participants from the high-risk 55 plus age group. That too, they were all asymptomatic. In fact, most of the participants were asymptomatic and there were 0 women from the 55 plus age group. Tell me how this highly flawed study with a very small sample size, lack of age diversity and a gender bias can serve as evidence for anything. And if that wasn't enough, there's more. The result of the study was gotten using a day 7 RT-PCR test. But here's my question, if most participants were asymptomatic, how do you determine when they got infected? Day 7 could have been day 10 or day 15 15 for some people. Another red flag is their conflict of interest statement. Every public funded or company funded study has to disclose if there are any financial interests associated with the study. In this case, Patanjali used the study as a selling point for Coronal. The paper does not declare these conflicts of interests, but it also conveniently doesn't mention Acharya Balakrishna's position as the chairman of Patanjali Ayurvedic products. After the product Coronal was released, this is what Baba Ramdev said in a statement. I am confident that even if I contract coronavirus, I will recover from it within a matter of days. Coronal will eradicate the virus from within one's body within 3 to 5 days. Think about this, okay? On the one hand, you have pharma companies spending millions to design and develop a molecule that can lead to a specific mechanism within the body in order to fight the disease. And on the other hand, you have Patanjali, who, as a marketing gimmick, conduct a flawed study using patients whose disease will resolve anyway and call it evidence-based. As a consumer and a customer buying their products and giving them money, aren't we being made fools of? Acharya Balakrishna did a complete 180 when questions were raised regarding the legitimacy of the COVID cure, and the Ayush Ministry claimed they knew nothing about the coronal claims. This is what the CEO of Patanjali had to say.
हमने दवाई के अंदर तो ये हमने कहा ही नहीं कि ये हम कोरोना को जो है कंट्रोल करते हैं, क्योर करते हैं.
हिपोक्रेसी की भी सीमा होती है.
Patanjali then started promoting this as an immunity booster. Immunity boosters are basically a scam. I've talked about this in detail in one of my previous videos, but briefly here, there isn't one thing or food item that you can eat that can boost your immunity. Your immune function is dependent on your overall diet and your exercise. Okay, Prana, we get it. Maybe Coronal wasn't a great move by Patanjali. But how can you say that they're fooling us based on just this? This was just a one-time thing, right? Let's start with a few of their healthcare bestsellers. Divi Medavati. This is the description from their website. Is useful in several brain disorders including memory loss and epilepsy. It promotes self-confidence and is a mental tonic for intellectuals. And last but not the least,
डिप्रेशन के लिए और नींद के लिए सुन लो, 2 गोली मेधावटी की खा लो, सुबह शाम डिप्रेशन की दवाइयां जरूरत ही नहीं पड़ेगी.
these were the claims. Now let's unpack the evidence. The first major ingredient is Brahmi or Bacopa monnieri. Ayurvedic practitioners say that it can improve mental ability and memory. What does scientific research have to say about it? Well, nothing definite. Studies that looked into the effect of regular consumption of Brahmi couldn't find any significant improvement in short-term or long-term memory due to Brahmi. Another review pointed out that there might be some positive effect of Brahmi, but they can't be certain because some of the papers reviewed had flaws in methodology, and in some cases Brahmi exhibited a low toxicity in model organisms and humans. I can go on because most of the studies associated with this either have weak or no evidence to support the claim made on the website. So without clear evidence, especially when there are indications of toxicity, why would you market this? The worst part of this is taking a serious mental health issue like depression and trivializing it. Why go for evidence-based medicines and therapy when you can just do yoga and take 2 pills of this? Moving on to Divya Melanokrit Gold, a tablet that apparently helps to treat leukoderma, which is a skin condition where a person loses pigment on their skin due to a burn or a cut or allergies. Not to be confused with the autoimmune disease vitiligo. Now, if you look at oral medications for leukoderma, this is what we get. Leukoderma can't be cured or prevented, only the effects can be reduced by repigmentation therapy, light therapy or surgery. There's no sign of oral medication. When you look for studies for the same, the only ones you find are in predatory journals like this one. How do I know? Here's a list of known predatory journals, and this journal is right here. Its lack of a peer review is extremely obvious because the study is very poorly designed, and this conclusion that they've drawn is based on just one single patient, which makes it unreliable. So there goes their claim on curing leukoderma. Finally, we come to something every Indian uncle swears by: Patanjali's Giloy Amla and Karela juice. Juices that claim to treat diabetes, improve digestion and boost your immunity. Whenever you see the words immune booster, That's a red flag because companies can simply get away with calling their product an immune booster. How's anyone who eats it going to test it? By exposing themselves to a virus and see if your immunity holds up against it? As you might have guessed from the trend, no actual research suggests any of these ingredients can do any of the things they claim. If we look at the top few studies, one of them is a predatory journal. The second one is not even a study, it's more like an essay, just stating hearsay without any proper evidence. And this one says insignificant effects. On the other hand, we actually have evidence for how bad they can be. Isn't this blatant endangering of people who are buying this? Disclaimer, I'm not saying that amla and karela are bad for you. They are nutritious, but when eaten as food within limits, not every day or multiple times as a medicine. Now, other cases of these drugs ever causing harm to a patient, the curiosity of a doctor led to an independent chemical analysis and revealed the actual content of some of these medicines. When you look at your non-Ayurvedic shampoo or toothpaste or biscuits, you will see that the ingredients are listed in order of greatest amount to smallest amount because these products go through very strict scrutiny and have to follow strict rules of packaging and labeling for food and cosmetics as regulated by government bodies. But when it comes to Ayurvedic products, these rules aren't well defined or enforced, which is why we get ingredient lists like this. What Sugandha Dravya? What fragrance? Why are these ingredients so vague? What if someone is allergic to the aromatic components being used? Shouldn't they know before they buy? On the other hand, when you look at these labels, the fragrance is listed clearly so that you can make an informed choice while buying. Not just Patanjali, many other herbal and Ayurvedic products and not cosmetics have vague ingredient lists. It isn't just me pointing these things out because of some bias. A study published in the International Journal of Ayurveda Research, which is run by the Ministry of Ayush, says this exact thing. They say how 1. The Drugs and Cosmetics Act 1940, which Ayurvedic formulations come under, specifies certain rules regarding what must be there in the labels, which are not being followed by manufacturers in Ayurveda. The Act itself is vague regarding certain things. For example, the Act only says that Ayurvedic formulations being exported need to specify an expiry date. But this often gets interpreted as those products which are being marketed in India need not have an expiry date. There are many such problems that the paper lists. I'll leave a link down below so you can check it out. As if all these weren't enough, the Ministry of Ayush, the protector and promoter of unscientific medicine in India, recently got the government of India to approve Ayurveda products without a clinical trial or safety study reports. So what does all this lead to? Recently, a patient visited a doctor complaining of severe jaundice, and the doctor recommended some standard tests. The results revealed that the patient's liver has sustained severe damage. Naturally, the doctor asked the patient more questions about their eating and drinking habits or whether they're on any medication. The patient revealed that they were regularly taking Patanjali's Giloy Amla and Karela juice. He had a suspicion that the contents of the bottle weren't exactly as advertised. So he sent them to a lab, and this is what it revealed. Presence of heavy metals like lead, chromium, cobalt, and traces of insecticides and liver toxic compounds. This isn't a single instance. Over 200 cases of liver failure and toxicity have been reported due to the regular consumption of these products. To tell us more about side effects from Ayurvedic products, we have with us someone who knows this case very closely and regularly tests alternative medicines for such unlisted and potentially toxic ingredients. Dr. Abby Phillips, aka the Liver Doc. Welcome, Dr. Abby, to Science is Dope. I want to first ask you what led you to conclude that these products were the cause of the liver damage you saw?
Yeah, thank you, Pranav, for having me as a guest on your show. So basically, when we looked at most of these products, I mean, including products that are marketed by Patanjali, when we diagnose a patient with herb-induced liver injury or an Ayurveda herbal-induced liver injury, it's a diagnosis of exclusion. For example, we look at all the known causes of liver injury and tick them off one by one. For example, a patient who has not been consuming alcohol and the time to development of this liver injury actually fits. So that is known as a temporal correlation. So when you have a temporal correlation and when you have all the other known causes out during our evaluation, then we know that we say that, this is the probable or a possible cause of drug-induced liver injuries because of this particular herb.
And what usually happens to a patient if they have this sort of liver injury?
That actually depends on the status of the liver per se. For example, you can actually have, so when you look at a Patanjali product, like for example, take Giloy, we have had a lot of publications on this. So what we have seen is that some patients develop acute liver injury. For example, their livers are good. They don't have any pre-existing liver disease. And then they develop a herbal liver injury purely based on this product. So when you withdraw the product and give some sort of supportive care, a lot of them actually improve. The whole liver injury resolves and patients do well in the long term. But sometimes a patient can actually have a flare of an underlying liver disease. For example, there are a lot of patients who have autoimmune hepatitis where the autoimmune hepatitis is silent. And once there is some insult, some stressor, or some risk factor that can actually manipulate their immune system, for example, Giloy herb can do that. Then what happens is that the silent autoimmune hepatitis can actually flare. So once that flare happens, it can be a severe flare or a reactivation, and that leads to severe liver injury and liver failure. So patients can actually present with acute liver failure. Acute liver failure is actually an emergency condition in hepatology. Patients, a lot of them actually do end up with a liver transplant to survive. So that is one other group of patients. The third group is something known as acute on chronic liver failure. For example, they already have an underlying liver disease which is known or unknown. For example, they have a cirrhosis due to any other cause. For example, alcoholic cirrhosis or hepatitis B cirrhosis, hepatitis C cirrhosis. And on top of that, they develop Giloy liver injury or a herbal liver injury. Then they develop something known as acute on chronic liver failure. That is, they already had a chronic liver disease which is stable, but now it has become severely unstable because of this presence of this herbal liver injury. These patients do the worst. For example, most of them either end up, they very rapidly develop multiple organ failure or die, or they land up in an ICU and they need an emergency liver transplant to take them to improve their survival. So these three are the main clinical scenarios that we face when we have a herbal liver injury. Especially in Giloy, we have actually seen this and published about it in a journal called Hepatology Communications just a couple of years back. So and there are a lot of these patients who actually don't come with jaundice at all. They just have simple hepatitis.
I also wanted to ask you, why is the liver affected so much, so disproportionately?
Yeah, because we have these. Whatever we consume, let us take an example of a drug for example. So these drugs have a way they enter the body. They go through a lot of processes and ultimately they have to be excreted out of the body. So some of them get excreted through processes in the liver, and some of them get excreted through processes in the kidneys. And so a large part of these drugs are actually metabolized and excreted through the liver actually, because the liver has that huge machinery that does that. That is known as a cytochrome oxidase system. So that actually metabolizes the drug, converts it into an active form, or converts it into a toxic form, which then makes it inert and then throws it out either through the stool or the urine. So that is why we have a lot of patients developing liver injury, because alcohol is the number one example. You take alcohol, the liver is the one that actually handles the whole thing. All the toxic components that come out of it, it makes it inert and then throws it out. So when you actually increase your alcohol use and it overwhelms the liver's capacity to metabolize and excrete out, that is when you start developing toxicities. Similar with these drugs also.
If you aren't following Dr. Abhi on Twitter yet, I highly recommend you do. I'll leave his Twitter handle on the screen. He regularly tests alternative medicines and posts the results, the evidence containing toxic heavy metals on Twitter. Let's circle back to the question we asked in the beginning. Was Acharya Balakrishna top 2% scientist in 2021? The 2% has nothing to do with Balakrishna. It is to do with the list. Anyone who has published a paper and has a citation percentile rank of 2% is in this list. I'll link the list down below. You can download and see for yourself. The list is sorted by citation score and his position is some 192,000 out of 200,000. The very bottom of the list. Check it out yourself. The link is down below. Depression, cancer, etc. These are medical conditions we didn't even know existed, let alone understand back when Ayurveda was first compiled. Just think rationally about it. How can a system of medicine that doesn't get updated and is mostly the same even today help treat all these diseases that we learned about much later? How can any system of medicine treat COVID-19 when it doesn't have any knowledge of germ theory? But here's one thing companies like Patanjali have learned over the years. Who needs evidence when you can ride on the sentiments of people? Ayurveda is something that has emotional and cultural value to a lot of Indians. But we must ask ourselves, is that all we need when people's lives are at stake? Don't we need safety, reliability, and evidence? No one can deny its legitimacy if there is sufficient evidence to back it up, such as well-structured studies and peer-reviewed journals, transparent research where the designation of authors are clearly mentioned, and clinical studies that are conducted using standard drug trial protocols that are used in evidence-based medicine. If this kind of evidence was there, I wouldn't even be making this video. Content like this is expensive for me to make. If you do like this video, I'd really appreciate it if you support me on Patreon, Buy Me a Coffee, YouTube memberships, or that thanks button, or by buying my merch or visiting my website. The links, I'll leave them down below. If you like this video, you'd probably also like this one I did on Dr. B.M. Hegde, who constantly supports alternative medicines, especially Ayurveda. I'll see you in the next one. Till then, remember, science is dope.